Today, we are going to focus on the best practice related to reservation of funds. So for our agenda, I'm going to start us out by just doing a recap of why we have created these best practices. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jason Peterson from NeighborWork Home Partners, who's going to talk through and present a little bit more about reservation of funds. And we're going to hear from some industry partners on kind of their perspective of the benefit of reserving funds, and then talk a little bit about the practical implications for administrators. Of course, we built in time for questions and discussion, but please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we move forward, and we'll make sure that we come back to them once we get done with the presentation portion. And then the latter half of the meeting, which I will not be recording, we're just going to have an open forum where we can talk a little bit and hear from each other about trends that we are seeing in the DPA realm. So go ahead. So again, some of you were able to join us in January, but just to provide a little bit of context, the best practices, which we launched a couple of months ago, were developed by a cross-sector working group of subject matter experts. And our goal in that work was really to improve the down payment ecosystem. And throughout the development of these best practices, the question that we continuously returned to was, what is in the best interest of the consumer? So we really see the benefits of the best practice being that we will promote standardization and transparency. Barriers will be removed from consumers and enable a more successful purchase transaction. We believe that this will lead to increasing the investment in down payment assistance and better meet the need of consumers, as well as creating a pathway forward to really help DPA providers legitimize the benefit of their current programs and ideally increase funding. And that we really want to ensure that the DPA is reaching those with the greatest need who, without the assistance, would not be able to access homeownership. And finally, we see this as an opportunity and really a starting point to establish a coalition amongst DPA providers statewide to, again, kind of improve this overall ecosystem and improve the experience of consumers. So just a quick reminder, we have added a page to the center's website under partner resources. And on this page, you can find the best practice documents. The recordings of these meetings, including the last meeting, are there. Registration is also housed there, and we do have registration open for our next meeting on June 1st. Which will focus on shared equity homeownership and how this can intersect with down payment assistance to make homeownership more accessible. And then we also have information on adoption and endorsement of the best practices. And I talked about this last time, but just briefly, adoption is reserved for down payment providers that are committed to implementing and aligning their current programs with the best practices. We know that it takes time to do this. And so to start, the program itself does not need to meet the standards, and really adoption is essentially a commitment that you're going to work towards alignment of these best practices. So with that, I am going to pause and mute myself, and I am going to turn it over to Jason Peterson.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. So again, my name is Jason Peterson. I am the Executive Director with NeighborWorks Home Partners. We are a nonprofit CDFI lender based out of the Twin Cities. The reason that Brooke asked me to speak today is we are one of the primary nonprofit down payment assistance providers here in the Twin Cities. Just to give you a little background on our work, we really launched in to down payment assistance programs about 7 years ago. Over the last 7 years, we provided 1,375 down payment loans totaling about $16 million. We've really ramped this up over the last 2 years. Over the last 2-year time period, we provided 550 down payment loans totaling just over $8 million. We administer programs on behalf of a number of partners and municipalities, as well as we raise funds from the CDF5 funds, EQ2, PRI, other investments for our in-house programs. As of today, we administer 7 distinct down payment programs, and we'll actually soon be launching an 8th. Today, what I'll be talking about are some logistics around fund reservation. One of the reasons I was asked to speak to this was we have some relevant recent experience administering a very large down payment program that utilized fund reservation. Specifically, some of you may have heard of the Neighborhood Lift program. It's a NeighborWorks America Wells Fargo national partnership that provides funds to local communities for large-scale down payment assistance. And so in 2020, we were fortunate to receive $7 million through this program locally to provide 426 down payment loans. This program had previously been to 81 cities, and we were the first city. This 82nd launch was the first pilot fund reservation, so on a very large scale. This is a pilot for us. In addition to that, we do fund reservations for several of our municipal partners that we work with. So before we jump in, I just want to quickly talk about what is fund reservation. So historically, for our down payment programs, and presumably for a number of other down payment programs for folks on this call, how those work is there's a pool of money, and the pool of money is available on a first come, first served basis when requirements are met. Often one of those requirements is the borrower has entered into a purchase agreement. They've found a property, they're ready to move forward. That's kind of how the traditional down payment system works, locally and nationally. So fund reservation, it's simply kind of what it means. It's the opportunity for a borrower to reserve funds, and an eligibility requirement isn't that they've purchased a home yet. So if you think analogously to pre-approval for a first mortgage, it's really the opportunity to reserve funds and look at a different way to provide down payment assistance than the traditional process. So we'll get to some more logistics later, but just wanted to provide that the overarching kind of thoughts on that. So Brooke, you can head to the next slide. So advantages to borrowers. So why is this important? Why is this helpful? Why is it important for us to be able to provide fund reservation and not be reliant upon kind of the traditional system that we've all often utilized with first come, first served basis? So one of the major things that we've seen through the LIFT program, so we launched the LIFT program in 2020 or late 2020, early 2021. So very tight housing market here in the Twin Cities. Common to have bidding wars. I mean, that was the time when people were waiving inspections. I mean, all these things going on. And so one of the most important pieces we see for fund reservation is the increase in confidence and buying power for borrowers. So if borrowers are utilizing down payment funds, and we often saw this, you'd have 5, 10, 15 offers on a property, and one of the offers includes down payments that there is no fund reservation, i.e. pre-approval on. The idea is, well, hopefully when I go to the nonprofit or the down payment provider, there'll be money available. That is not generally the offer that is taken by the seller. And so it really provides that confidence and that buying power for borrowers. Related to that, it reduces the uncertainty for the seller, so increasing the acceptance of offers. What we issue, and we'll get to this when we talk about some more specifics, but again, a fund reservation can look and act and is just like a pre-approval for a first mortgage. So you're coming in as a borrower with documentation that funds will be available for you, making your offer that much stronger. And then the big piece that really helps borrowers on the back end is it streamlines and accelerates closings. And so again, we'll talk through some of the specifics on what reservations require as a best practice, but a lot of the work can then be done up front. And so you're not scrambling at the end regarding the closing and regarding different pieces that might cause a deal to blow up and everything's known on the front end. So there are a number of really important advantages for borrowers. Brooke, you can go to the next slide. So with that, before I jump into the specifics, I would like to turn it to several of my partners in the field to talk about an industry perspective, and I will introduce all three and then I will let them talk in order. So excited to be joined by Roxanne Young-Kimball with the State of Minneapolis CPED, Cynthia Tyson with US Bank, and Mon Nguyen with Edina Realty. So with that, I will turn it over to Roxanne.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I just want to speak a little bit about the importance of fund reservation from the City of Minneapolis perspective. One of the reasons, it's actually fairly recent that we started doing fund reservation through our down payment assistance program. And one of the reasons why we think it's important is because of how competitive the housing market is, just like Jason was just speaking to. We've really seen that the housing market has gotten even more competitive due to the increase of institutional investors or all cash offers that are happening for affordable homes in our market. And for people who have barriers to home ownership, providing a reservation that can alleviate some of the stress that's connected with the home search process seems like the equitable and appropriate step for us to take as a funder. And it does come with some trade-offs. There are some challenges that come along with fund reservation for both the administrators and for funders. Now effectively, your resources are getting committed to potential borrowers for a period of time while they're searching for a home. And managing that pipeline can bring challenges. But those challenges are worth the equitable trade-off that fund reservation represents. And I'll turn it over to Cynthia.
Hey, Cynthia, you're on mute. Happens to the best of us. Nope, still muted.
Mute.
Oh,
there we
yay.
are. Sorry.
No worries.
So I wanted to introduce myself, Cynthia Tyson. I am with US Bank Home Mortgage and currently a sales manager. And my role here is, although it's a mortgage loan officer, it's been much more than that for me. US Bank allows me to expand out into wherever my preference is. And I remember sitting down with Lisa Ekstrom at Don Pablo's, right? And talking to her about home ownership and down payment assistance. And she just opened up my eyes as to what possibilities I could have for the borrowers when we were doing down payment assistance. And then Barb Graham, some of you may remember her, she showed me how you could layer in order to have somebody who really couldn't be a homeowner unless their payment was relatively low or relatively comparable to what their income was going to be, because they didn't have the ability. We have a lot of borrowers who don't have the ability that this year they're making $30,000 a year, and in 3 years from now they're going to be in a $60,000, $75,000, $100,000 a year job. It's not true. They're in a $30,000 a year job this year, 32, 35, 37. It's going to go up at a slower pace unless they're actually in school or something to that effect. But we needed to find a payment that they could afford so they could be successful with buying a home in the future. And down payment assistance lets us do that. I am so grateful, and for instance, Minnesota Housing never runs out of money anymore, right? I kind of was a little bit hesitant to use down payment assistance programs in the past. They'd run out of money. I'd get them pre-approved using a down payment assistance program. It's not there, and then I got to go say, sorry, can't have it, right? Nothing we can do. I had somebody win the lottery, so we were able to do their loan, but it really was that kind of craziness in order once down payment assistance got pulled out from underneath them. Now Minnesota Housing has down payment assistance that doesn't run out. So if I can get the customer approved utilizing their down payment assistance to begin with, that helps me get to the next stage. But even the $5,000 or the $10,000 down payment assistance that are out there sometimes makes that difference to where I can take them from a 3% down to a 5% down. And just by tuning it up that much, I get an approval. Whereas before at the 3% down, there just wasn't enough into the transaction. But by turning it up to from a 3 to a 5% down, now we're able to do the loan form. So there's many different facets in the down payment assistance. You have to be, in my opinion, you have to be somewhat smart in order to bring in all these different pieces. And there are a lot. There's so many different programs that are out there right now. I think I've got 39 on my board that are available, but it's so difficult to, they're in all different places. I have to go search for down payment assistance a lot. Whereas if it was in one spot, one place, I could put in this city, I could put in this address, I could put in something, and it would come up with the down payment assistance that's possible. That would be great. Just having a place, and the catch also is everybody has a different income qualification. There's the one that's the really low, then there's the moderate, then there's so many different, there's like 10 different, it feels like 10 different program codes out there that you have to follow in order to be able to get the information. So you really have to be an expert. And we don't have people that are always experts in everything. We need to bring something forward that allows them to be the expert with some effort, but not hours of effort. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm looking for in a down payment assistance program. I want to be able to let my new loan officer, as well as my seasoned loan officer who does down payment assistance 10 times a year, be able to go out and find the program at an easy place, be guaranteed that the money is there, because that makes the difference for them, right? And then be able to write an offer letter for that borrower. I have had multiple times where I have written an offer letter based upon a program, and all of a sudden the money isn't there. City of Eden Prairie was one of them, where we went and got the down payment assistance. We qualified, everything was good, and all of a sudden they said, you know what, we're changing our guidelines and we're going to put this customer into the new program guidelines, and then they don't qualify. It's like, woo, right? Okay, so they changed program guidelines. That's the one where they lost that house, but 2 weeks later they won the lottery, and so now we're back in buying a house again, right? But that was, I mean, they had to in order to gain that, right? Then we had one here recently. She was buying a duplex, and we went after the money. And Metro Home, I'm not trying to call anybody out. That's not the purpose of this, but Metro Home suddenly was out of money. Well, when did you run out of money? Well, they ran out of money quite a while before they posted that they ran out of money. And so being timely with that information, letting us know when the money's back in, you know, if it's going to refund, get new money. I mean, if I knew that the money was coming back in 30 days, maybe we could have pushed the closing out for 60 days to reapply for that money. But knowing when they're going to get another plentiful round of the money is very important as well, because that lets us be, I mean, the sellers don't want to be hanging out and waiting, right, forever. And we just need to be confident in what they do. So honestly, I get all my people approved based upon Minnesota housing to start with. And then after they find the house, then we go look for extra down payment assistance program. And if I only have 30 days to close the loan, I may not be looking for that extra down payment assistance program, because you all want 30 days in order to get the programs done. And I don't have 30 days to give you. And if I give you if I give you the package in 21 days, you make me go push the closing out so that you have your full 30 days. And that really, my borrower doesn't want to hear it. The seller doesn't want to hear it. No real estate agents want to hear it. So I won't even go that path unless I absolutely have to. So that's my negative. Not trying to be negative. I love down payment assistance. I can't tell you how many people wouldn't be homeowners today if we had not found down payment assistance for them. I I'm guessing besides my own down payment assistance that I help with, I help out the whole group here in Minnesota with their down payment assistance and providing those loan programs. And I would bet that we probably have 3 to 5 new homeowners a month that are happening because of the down payment assistance program. But with that, I am going to pass to Matt.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. Hi, all. Great work. I'm really appreciative of all of your work on getting more DPAs out there. Hi, let me introduce myself to you. I'm Man Nguyen. I'm a real estate professional based in St. Paul. I'm going on my 20 years in the field. I take immense pride in being the first Asian American president of the St. Paul Area Association of Realtors, a community of around 8,000 members. Currently, I'm actively engaged in training and learning, preparing for my role as the first Asian American chairman of the board of our multiple listing services here in Minnesota, which has over 20,000 subscribers. My ultimate mission and really unwavering commitment are to create a meaningful impactful growth in the communities that will last for generations. I'm going to give you some perspective from the real estate side today, and maybe some maybe a game changer. So, you know, when considering the benefits and challenges of a DPA, it's important to recognize that many sellers may be reluctant to accept an offer involving DPA. However, the benefits of DPAs are clear. It can provide buyers with more buying power and help jumpstart their home ownership journey. That being said, there are also some challenges associated with DPA. For example, it can slow down the buying process. The buyers may lose out on homes to others willing and able buyers. While the benefit of DPA may outweigh the challenges, it's important to note that the competitive real estate market that we're in, buyers may still lose out on places that could be their home, unfortunately. But overall, I think that it's important to weigh the benefits and challenges of DPA carefully when considering this option for home ownership. By understanding both the advantages and disadvantages, buyers can make informed decisions and potentially increase their chances of successfully purchasing a home with the help of DPA. I have an example for you guys. During my experience in real estate, I've come across situations where sellers have accepted an offer that involved DPA only for the funds to be no longer be available and caused the transaction to be canceled or delayed. For instance, while representing a seller client, the buyer's offer was accepted with a longer than expected closing time frame of about 45 days. The buyer had a great lender and a nice DPA grant program lined up, but a few weeks into the transaction, they were unable to secure the DPA funding and could no longer afford the home without it, unfortunately. To address this situation, I had an open conversation with my client, the seller, and explained the buyer's circumstances and their strong desire to obtain the DPA funding and their willingness to work hard to secure it. Fortunately, the seller agreed to delay the transaction until the buyer was able to secure the DPA funding. However, I do understand this may not be the outcome for every situation involving DPA. I think it's crucial to recognize that DPA can be a valuable tool for buyers, but it's important for both buyers and sellers to understand the potential risk and uncertainties that comes with it. Proper communications and transparency can go a long way in ensuring a successful real estate transactions for all parties. I have some thoughts on a commitment letter for DPA for you. Having a commitment letter for DPA at the time of offer can have a significant positive impact on the transaction for both the buyer and the seller. By having a commitment letter, the buyer demonstrates to the seller that they have taken the necessary steps to secure financing and are serious about purchasing the property. This can give the sellers mutual confidence that the transaction will close on time, as long as other contingencies are met. Furthermore, having a commitment letter for DPA can also help speed up the closing process. With the set closing date of approximately 30 days, both parties can work towards meeting the deadline and avoid any potential delays. This can reduce stress and uncertainty for both buyers and sellers. Overall, having a commitment letter for DPA at the time of offer is a positive development for the transaction. It helps demonstrate the buyer's commitment and can help expedite the closing process. This can ultimately lead to a smoother and more successful transaction for all parties involved. To sum it up, it can be a game changer. Jason?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mon, for your insights. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Roxanne. We appreciate the industry perspective from all three seats. Brooke, you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So I want to raise up, I really appreciated Mon's scenario that he brought forward, or the situation he brought forward. And that is a challenge, and all, some of the challenges that both Cynthia and Roxanne brought forward. There are pros and cons to the current way that down payment is utilized and administered. And I want to do a quick shout out to Brooke and the Minnesota Home Ownership Center, as that is the whole idea around these best practices, is how we can start to look at some of these challenges around different programmatic requirements, different geographic requirements, different pieces, and how we can start to streamline that, because the whole end goal is that we can help the consumers through this. I do want to highlight two things that were raised by the industry panel that are really important to consider and keep top of mind. One is about the fund and fund availability. So Mon's specific scenario that he brought forward, that sounds like that individual at the time they applied, they were eligible for funds, but there was no commitment letter, pre-approval letter, reservation letter for those down payment funds. And as that deal progressed and they came time to closing, those funds were no longer available. And so that's exactly what the reservation of funds is looking to try to ensure doesn't happen. And then I think another one that Cynthia brought forward is just the time frame around this. So I want to just talk quickly about the benefits to the DPA provider. So one, I'll start at the bottom here. Streamline process and closing. And so I think an important piece to this is when for the best practice for fund reservation, a lot of the eligibility is determined on the front end. And again, we're about to walk through this, but the idea is, that the individual, you've done this eligibility, you've ensured that they're eligible at the time of application before the pre-approval is issued. And so issues do not arise throughout the process that would likely make them ineligible. And that streamlines the process at the end because the work is already done up front. So that's an important piece as a DPA provider, is you've already done most of the important eligibility requirements on the front end, and it won't hold up a deal on the back end. So I'll just continue from the bottom up. Greater predictability for use of funds. So we will talk a little bit about what happens if you have limited funding, which Roxanne raised, which is an important and valid point to consider when you're looking at fund reservation. But there is an idea about the usage of funds, and it's greater predictability because you know what's out there, you know how many pre-approvals are out there, and you have an understanding of where your dollars go. We have a number of programs that have fund reservations. We have a number of programs that don't. And one of the programs is actually one Cynthia mentioned about Metro Home. That is a program that doesn't have fund reservations, and it can be challenging when funds come and go. As a DPA provider, it's challenging when you don't have a lot of dollars. And so this is one way you can have greater predictability. Increased partnership and success for the consumer. I already touched on this a couple of slides ago, but I think this is really helpful because it's not just as a DPA provider, there are many times in which somebody will connect with us towards the end of the process and say, hey, I've got this offer in. The offer was put in 2 weeks ago. I heard you got down payment. What can you help me with in the next 2 weeks? that is not a great way to move a transaction forward. And so if you start on the front end and you can get funds reserved to get these pre-approvals out there from the down payment assistance provider, it really increases that partnership and the success for the customer. And then moving to the top one, advance the mission by reaching our target customer. So this is really important for us as a nonprofit lender to ensure and provide the tools for low to moderate income borrowers that might not be able to provide a strong offer without these down payment dollars, like the scenario that Mon brought forward. And we're able to really advance our mission by reaching these target consumers by providing them with that important tool to make their offer more competitive. So Brooke, you can go to the next slide. All right, so I want to just now talk through some basics about how this works. And so again, we're looking at fund reservations here. So a couple of pieces that we suggest as best practices, this again came from the LIFT program and our experience, then experience with others that are doing this across the country that we've talked with. So Mon had mentioned this, and this is an important piece. Part of providing that fund reservation is to ensure that the borrower is serious about this process. And one way to show that, and one suggestion we have as a best practice, is funds cannot be reserved until the consumer is determined to be mortgage ready. And so that would be the inclusion of receiving a pre-approval for the first mortgage lender and completing homebuyer education. And so for the way we ran the LIFT process is these were two points that needed to be completed before they could even apply for a reservation. The rationale behind this is it's important for folks to have completed homebuyer education at this point, so they're knowledgeable about the process, but then they are serious about this. And if there are limited funds available, you want to make sure that folks that get a reservation of funds are able to move the process forward, henceforth they're mortgage ready. So the other piece that I talked about, this is a really important piece for this, is at the time then, so they're both mortgage ready and they've completed homebuyer education. The next piece then to provide a reservation of funds is you're really looking at what are the program requirements, what are the eligibility requirements. That often is going to be income limits. So what you would do at that time, what we do at that time, and the best practice is you review income at that point. So right away, you're reviewing income and you're determining that they're income eligible. And that is a point in time process that you do. And you can issue that reservation of funds. And oftentimes you do not have to go back and look at income again. So you have now looked at their income, you determined they're eligible, and that part of the process is done. There might be other income eligibility pieces such as first time home buyer, first generation home buyer. These are pieces that are done at the front end as well. So you can think about this, you know, as a first mortgage pre-approval. What are the conditions that need to be met, and what conditions can you take care of out of the gate to make this reservation of funds the most effective? And it's really looking at all these eligibility pieces. I do want to note that, so at least for all of our programs, for most programs, you're not looking at as a down payment provider, your ability to repay. So you're not pulling credit, you're not looking at the analysis ability to repay. You're looking at what are the requirements for this program. Usually it's going to be around income, and again, first time, first generation, and you're making sure all of that is taken care of on the front end. And so then at that point, what we have done and what we would suggest is you issue a written down payment assistance commitment letter. So this would include very specific. Ours looks very similar to a first mortgage pre-approval. And that's really intentional on our end because we want, you know, as was mentioned by Cynthia and Mon, when folks are looking at a real estate transaction, we want to give folks confidence that this borrower is bringing forth a strong offer. So how to do that is we really try to mirror and look at what would a first mortgage pre-approval look like. So important to have the program name, the exact reservation amount, if there are any geographic limits, a timeline for executing the purchase agreement, a timeline for closing. And then, so we'll talk a little bit, I think, on the next slide about some of these timelines. But so those pieces are all very important, and it's important to have, not only to make this DPA commitment letter to ensure that it's effective, but it's also important as an administrator to have these timelines in place, because there are folks that don't move forward. And if you have funds reserved and they don't withdraw or cancel their application, that is still a reservation that is out there and can hold up dollars. So having these timelines in place is really important. What we suggest and what we have utilized is the opportunity for these reservations to be extended based on administrator's discretion. And then if they're not extended, they're automatically canceled, so you can open up those dollars for others. All right, so here is the timeline for what this process looks like. So the first step again is to go to a first mortgage lender to get a pre-approval, and then home buyer education. So those two can go in either order, but making sure those two are done is going to be an important first piece we suggest as a best practice for this. And then it would come to the DPA administrator. And then through this process, they would then do what I just talked through as far as looking at all the eligibility requirements around income. And again, this is a big piece. I want to highlight the importance of this. This is the point in which you really need a full credit file for, what we call credit for down payment. So you're going to need all the income documentation right out of the gate. And so this is going to be before they found a property. They will provide you with all the income documentation required to qualify them based on their income, and then any other qualifying requirements. At that point, the DPA administrator would provide this reservation of funds. For the LIFT program, we provided a 90-day fund reservation. So that means they have a fund reservation that allows for 90 days. So the funds are reserved for them for 90 days. If they find a home within that 90-day period, then and they execute a purchase agreement, then they would have an additional 60 days to close that property. So that's an automatic piece that comes in. If they don't find a property within that 90 days, then that goes back to the slide before about the possibility for an extension. You can look at that and build it in. We would not suggest longer than 90 days because, again, you're holding up dollars that might be used other places. But if somebody can't find a property and really wants to continue looking, that's something that you can build in. But then you'd have that initial 90 days plus 60 days to buy, and then you move on to closing from there. All right, so I do want to, so just before we jump into this limited funds, just a little bit more about our programs, and it ties into this. So with the Neighborhood Lift program in 2020, so again, we had $7 million in funding available. With that process, then we had to determine, so that seemed like a lot of money. So it's like, okay, that sounds great. We can help people for a really long time. But even if you have a lot of money, likely someday it's going to run out. So yes, Minnesota Housing's program has, a seemingly never ending dollars, but most down payment programs, they don't operate like that. So it's really something to think through on the front end. We also do pre-approvals for the city. We have administer programs on behalf of the city of Minneapolis and the city of Woodbury. And we do pre-approvals for or reservation of funds for both of those. And so at different times we come into situations where we have had limited funding. So it's really important to think about, what are you going to do if you have limited dollars? And so I do want to highlight, so we had $7 million for a program. And at the outset, we're like, well, we have a ton of money. This is never going to run out. We didn't give this much thought. For these other programs, we had to give this thought earlier, but it's something to think about on the front end. And the smaller dollar amount you have, the more you need to think about it. When you have limited funds and you reserve funds, that means there's going to be folks out there that have pre-approvals. And if you have, if you have $50,000 in your program and you're doing $10,000 down payment, you have the opportunity to provide 5. If you provide 5 reservation of funds and everybody's shopping, you don't have any more dollars to commit. So thinking through how you want to commit that. And then for us, what it came down to when we started to run out of the LIFT dollars, we realized, wow, we need a different process to do this. And what does that process look like? And that was really an important piece for us to think about. And so we initially had a first come, first serve process. And so similar to what we did is every Monday morning, we had between 5 and 50 reservations expire the week before. First come, first serve Monday morning. Folks could then apply to get a reservation of funds. That has pros, that has cons. If you set a time, it's very fair. And folks are all able to come and, come at the same time, and we put it out there and gave folks warning. But what we did realize is, and we tinkered with even what time and what day that was. What we didn't find that was always the most equitable process, because there were folks that might not have access to a computer at that given time. So halfway through this process, halfway through the LIFT program, we switched and we had a different process set up where when we had funds become available, we would actually set a 3-day period in which they could put in their minimal application, and that would be pre-approval from a first mortgage lender and their home buyer education certificate. So if they had those two pieces, they could then register to try to get this reservation of funds. We sometimes would have 5 slots available, and we would have 25, 35, 55 people apply for those 5 slots. And so we felt that was important because it provided folks a broader time to enter this. The con of that is you're working with a lot of folks, and a lot of folks don't get in. So there's a couple ways to look at it. There's pros and cons to both, but really, if you're looking at doing reservations of funds, no matter how much money you have, likely at some point you're going to run into this. We learned the hard way. It wasn't great to switch halfway through, but we did, to think through what you want that process to look like. You can go to next slide, Brooke. All right, so I do want to talk through a little bit about the administrative costs. So if you think about how a transaction works in kind of the normal down payment realm without a reservation of funds, you have somebody that comes in, they have a purchase agreement in place. We, again, operate until 2020. We operated all of our programs in that way, no reservations of funds. We had about just over 90% of all of our deals. So this would have been folks that had a purchase agreement in place. Over 90% of all the deals that came to us ended up closing. How generally we get paid as a down payment assistance provider is when a loan closes. So loans don't close, you don't get paid. So when we switch to the reservation of funds, that looks different because you reserve funds for a lot of folks and you have a lot more folks that don't close. I have some statistics I want to bring up regarding our LIFT program. So we had 787 folks formally apply for a LIFT loan. 104 of those folks were denied for various eligibility reasons, or 13%. 117 of them withdrew their application, which is about 15%. 140 received a reservation which expired. They did not use. So that's about 18%. And then 426 folks closed a loan. That's 54%. So really, generally speaking, about half the folks that contacted us closed a loan. So what that means on the administrative side is half the folks we worked with, we got paid for. If you look at cutting that just a little bit differently, the reservations that expired. So about 1 in 5 folks that got a reservation didn't end up using the dollars. So if you look at who did we actually do the full income eligibility requirement for, it's going to be the folks that got an adverse action, the folks who closed a loan and the reservation expired. And so if you add all of those up, you're looking at about 75% of the folks. And again, we got paid for 50. About 1 in 5 of those ended up having the reservation expire. So one thing you need to think about then is, how do you pay for this as an administrator? And then as a municipality or somebody who's looking to hire a group to do this, how do you compensate folks to do this? In general, it took us on average about 2 hours to review all of the income requirements, to issue an eligibility determination. So you're looking at about 2 hours. With overhead and everything, For our organization, that's about $150. I've already talked a little about the rate of conversion. So then you look at how do you pay for that? So with the Neighborhood Lift program, we were fortunate that we were able to get a grant to cover this cost. So that's how that worked for us. We have a couple other programs right now where we don't have that built into place. So you're looking at, an increased administrative fee that's paid by the funder. This could be an increase when on loans closed, or you could build the cost of the reservation into the fee structure. One thing that we are hesitant to do, but something you can look at, is the borrower pays. So you require the borrower to pay for this, or you pay the reservation fee by the third party. So something to think about when you're looking at what would a reservation of funds be. You need to understand you're going to be working with a lot more people that aren't going to be closing loans. All the good things we've talked about are a result of that, but there is a cost to that as well. So I think that's all I have.
Thanks, Jason. So I would say thank you for that. Thank you for the great information. And I just would like to open it up to see if we have questions. And I would say that we're a small enough group that if you just want to come off camera or come on camera or just unmute yourself, that would be great.
Brooke, just noting there's a question in the chat about when the recording will be available.
Probably next week. Thanks, Roxanne. You can be my fake producer. I would say that it'll be available probably early next week. And we'll have that posted on the website. Any other questions about Jason? I know it's a lot to take in and think about. Go ahead, Marnie.
Yeah, so I'm with St. Louis Park, and we have one program that does do reservations and one that does not. So our standard DPA does not. And this is probably a really basic question. We hire someone to administer the loans for us. So sorry if it's too basic, but when it comes to reservation, so if you choose to reserve funds, but you haven't reserved all the funds, certainly you can set up your own program the way you want, I suppose, but that it wouldn't be that people have to apply before they have a purchase agreement. Like right now, you have to have a purchase agreement. But if you do a reservation of funds, if there are funds available, could somebody apply or have a purchase agreement? They found a house, they're going to buy it, and then apply, or would you always say it's either one or the other? You either have a program that's set up that that you allow reservation of funds, and that means you have to reserve them before you sign a purchase agreement. Does that make sense? I don't know if my question made sense.
Yeah, no, I think your question is making sense. It's like,
Okay.
So you do this fund, it's kind of hybrid, right? So I do a
Yeah.
fund reservation, but I've still got funds available. Is someone who now comes to me and has a purchase agreement, are they ineligible essentially because they didn't come before they put in an offer?
Thank
Jason,
you. That is exactly what I meant.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
just said it better.
No, we totally got you. So Jason, do you want to comment on that or have thoughts on that, or others?
Yeah, I can provide a comment, but interested in thoughts on this. And I know others are doing down payment here. So Marnie, I really appreciate you bringing that forward. If others have just thoughts, ideas around this, please bring it forward. We have been testing, we've done a few programs around this, but we're always learning as well. For the LIFT program, our large down payment, we did not offer the hybrid opportunity. So we only allowed folks to come in. And what we ended up was, we opened up the opportunity for random selection noon on Thursday, and was 9 a.m. Thursday to 9 a.m. Monday. And so within that time frame, we had a lot, it's relative, but every week we'd have a couple folks that had a purchase agreement, and we had no way we did not tweak that. And that can be frustrating. And so I do think if you have if you have funds available and you have the opportunity to provide the hybrid method, I think that's helpful. You need to make sure it's fair and equitable. And that's what we do with both the city of Minneapolis and the city of Woodbury. And so if you have funds available, I think that's great. A lesson learned from Lyft is we did not have that available, and there were folks that had real deals that weren't able to access those funds because they weren't chosen in random selection.
So I'm hearing it's possible. Go ahead, Tanya.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought I was
No.
on mute. I was going to raise my hand and then I coughed. Can you talk a little bit more about, we're working on creating a program and then probably going to hire someone else to manage it for us. So can you talk a little bit more about the administrative cost stuff that you were saying? You were kind of talking about a per hour or a per application sort of fee and the person paying it, or did you guys get a percentage of the amount of money that was available? Can you talk a little bit more about how that worked out?
For sure. Yeah. So generally speaking, for the non-fund reservation programs, how those are generally structured. Well, there's two ways to structure them. And we have them structured both ways. We have programs structured in which it's a flat percentage of the down payment assistance. And so, we have a program that generally the down payment's $30,000 and our fee is 7.8% of that. So we have this flat fee that we get each time. We also have several programs in which we just have a flat fee, $1,400 every time a loan closes. The flat fee I think works better because you can more easily adjust the down payment amount. So again, this is regardless of reservations. I think the flat fee works better because you can adjust the down payment amount easier. And we've had to do that with a number of, haven't had to, we've been fortunate to be able to do that with a number of our municipal partners as we've over the last several years just see these quick increases in the cost of housing. And so we've had a number of our municipal partners that say, hey, let's be responsive to this. So City of Minneapolis and Roxanne's a great example. They had $10,000 loans, and this past year for certain folks at certain income, we were able to adjust that to $20,000, but we have a flat fee for that. So we didn't have to make any changes. So in general, I would, they can go both ways, but I would urge a flat fee. And then that's just when a loan closes. So again, as a down payment provider, as our organization is the administrator of a program such as the City of Woodbury, City of Minneapolis, we have to build into account that we are going to work with folks that don't close. But again, more than 90% of the folks that come to us with purchase agreements close. So that's built into that fee. So the nuance that the fund reservation brings forward today then is if you're looking at reserving funds, from our Lyft example, about half the people closed. And so either that fee needs to be raised for the closed loans, or you need to look at some other way to pay for that fund reservation piece. So how we were able to do that with the neighborhood Lyft program is we received a grant from the funder to basically cover that cost. So they said, we're going to give you X amount of money, and then you're not going to charge any of these borrowers, and you're going to do this fund reservation because of the importance of that fund reservation piece. So that's a possibility. So really again, kind of back to the different possibilities. One possibility is you increase the fees for the loans that are closed. One possibility is you provide some type of funding, just overarching funding, and have the administrator do that fund reservation. One piece that we suggested for the neighborhood Lyft program, and they went a different direction, is for each time a fund reservation is issued, then the funder, the investor, the municipality could pay a fee. So each time a reservation is put forward, you provide $100. And then the fourth option that I would not argue for, but is a possibility, is you could charge the borrower for that. So you could have the borrower come and say it's $100 or $150 to apply for this, and they would cover that cost. But those are kind of the different structures. And so that's the fund reservation piece. The back end, and then the administration and the closing and, the post-closing work and all that is, and I would urge continues to be tied to loan closings themselves. And Tanya, if you'd like to dig into that more in detail, I'd be happy to talk offline about some more specifics.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll talk with my colleague with the stuff we're working on, and then we may reach out to you because I just want to make sure that we're we obviously want to set people up for success, and I don't want to necessarily put fee burdens on the people that are trying to buy, that we're trying to assist. And so I want to make sure that we're, being responsive and paying people for what it costs for them to do the work too, because I'll be honest, like, I'm pretty sure that no matter how I pay or how we set up the fees thing, it's still going to be kind of cheaper for us to hire people to do it than to hire staff, right?
Yes.
To get another staff person on board to do the work, because you'd have to have somebody just doing this all day. Because I've ran a number of different down payment programs with neighborhood stabilization money and home money and stuff, and it's very time consuming to try to deal with all the questions and things, which is why I'm super excited about, the homeownership center sort of bringing all of us together to try to work on these best practices, so that maybe all of us can align as much as absolutely possible, so there isn't as many questions and concerns by the consumer. When they're getting ready to do that, they'll, like you were talking about, they would know where and how much, down payment assistance is out there, and which ones they can sort of self-screen themselves if it's clearer to people and more transparent. So I just really appreciate all the work, because I mean, we obviously want people to get into successful, sustainable home ownership. That is our goal. And so we want to get the right amount of money, but we're not going to have endless. We're not going to be the housing finance agency where we never run out of money. That's definitely not going to be us. But we want to be very conscientious about trying to make stuff line up. So
Thanks
thank
for
you
that,
for that
Tanya.
offer. So I might be hitting you up for that for sure.
Yeah, and I'll drop my for anyone on here, but definitely happy to talk to Tanya. I'll drop my contact info in the chat.
Thanks for that, Tanya. And I think the takeaway is that if you support the concept of fund reservation, you're going to have to provide a little bit more administration fee to the entities that originate these DPAs. And I think a lot of it just kind of really comes down to what is the goal of your DPA program? And is your goal really around supporting and helping those who, but not for the DPA, would likely not become a homeowner? Having fund reservation and spending a few more $100 per transaction, I think outweighs by far the cost. So that's the thinking. And I think as we implore DPA to help us help to kind of be a more successful tool around closing the home ownership gap and doing more targeted approach, I think this idea of fund reservation is essential to make people more competitive in their offers. Is there other questions, just thoughts overall, concerns, pushback, anything else on this topic before we kind of transition to kind of open up the floor for kind of talking about trends in DPA? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you to Jason and others who presented, and I'm going to stop the recording, but please stay on the call. Definitely want to be able to have some further discussion and talk a little bit more openly about general topics.